Hi, everybody. I'm Ham Gillett, and I am the outreach coordinator for the Greater Upper Valley Solid Waste District and also the Southern Windsor, Windham County Solid Waste District. So my territory runs from Rockingham all the way up to Vershire, along the Connecticut River, and over west as far as Woodstock and Bridgewater, and 24 towns in all. I'm supposed to be doing outreach in schools, and you know how that's going, and also in businesses, restaurants. So here we are. For the last 3 years, I have done actually on-site composting workshops with Kat Buxton, who is my guru, and I think many of you, some of you may know her, but I owe most of what I'm going to tell you tonight to her. And I also wanted to thank my colleague, Patrick Cody from Okemo Valley TV, who is hosting this whole thing and has walked me through the process of getting it set up. And he is going to attack any Zoom bombers who might appear. So without further ado, a couple of things. This is an experiment, and I apologize ahead of time if it doesn't work out quite the way you thought it was going to, but we're hoping that you'll at least get some worthwhile information out of it. Patrick has muted you all. I'm going to sort of go through the basics, and when I'm done, I will open it up to questions. I've had people email me questions already, so I will probably address those first, and then if any of you have any questions, please feel free to ask them via chat or phone, however you can get to us. And if we run out of time, I'm hoping to go just till 8 o'clock or so. Please feel free to contact me by email afterwards. We're going to give you contact information at the end. Oh, one other thing, when you ask a question, if you could please just say your name and what town you're from. Don't have to say your last name if you don't want, but we'd like to know where you're calling from. Okay, I think that's everything. And grab a pencil and paper if you want to write things down. This will be available afterwards, as I've said, on several public access TV stations, and Patrick assures me it'll be available some other place as well. But if you want to jot stuff down, go ahead. Very briefly, the reason that I'm doing these and that we are doing this at the Solid Waste District is that I'm sure most of you all have heard by now of Vermont Act 148, the Universal Recycling Law, which was instituted by the legislature back in 2013, 2012. And this is the very last piece of it, this food scrap piece. And what, as it stands today, July 1st, this July 1st is the date when all of us in Vermont, residents, businesses, et cetera, are all going to be required to keep our food scraps out of our trash. There have been a lot of wrinkles in this process. The legislature is still trying to iron some of them out. One of them being, we don't know whether the deadline is going to be extended, but let's pretend as of now that everybody's going to have to do this on July 1st. There are three major reasons that the legislature has started this law, implemented this law. One is that we have one landfill left in the whole state of Vermont. It's up in Coventry. It's owned by Casella Waste Systems. It's very close to Canada. They have applied for a permit to extend the landfill, but once that is full, that's it for the state of Vermont. Nobody's going to build anymore. And a lot of you, when you throw your food scraps in the trash now, your trash and your food scraps are being hauled all the way almost to Canada to be buried in the ground. So in terms of carbon footprint, not such a great thing. Speaking of carbon footprint, I've seen a picture of a bunch of carrots that somebody dug out of a landfill. They'd been there for 20 years and they still looked like a bunch of carrots. So when food scraps are buried in the landfill, they try to digest anaerobically with no oxygen, but basically they just give off a lot of gas, a lot more gas than percentage-wise than a certain number of a fleet of buses or airplanes or whatever. So, and those of you who are scientists may be laughing, but I'm just trying to give an overview of what's going on. So that's number two, methane produced by stuff in landfills. The third is that this is being discovered, and really across the globe, that we have been burying a lot of countries have been burying our food scraps for many years. And lo and behold, it turns out that if we turn them into compost and regenerate the soil, there's a lot more productive land. So Kat Buxton, who I mentioned before, has a wonderful website called Grow More, Waste Less. And she not only is a terrific composter, she is also very passionately involved in regenerating soil and soil health. So I encourage you to look that up. Okay. For you, your options for compost, before I get into the science, very basic science of composting, I want to tell you what your options are as you are required to do this. The first is, of course, backyard composting, which we are encouraging everybody to do because, first of all, it's free. Second of all, it can be fun to do. Third of all, it gives you something to throw on your trees or your shrubs or your garden or your lawn or whatever. So backyard composting is number one. Number two is those of you who are lucky enough to live in a somewhat Vermont urban setting, you may be able to ask your hauler to pick up your food scraps. If your hauler is now picking up your trash and your recyclables, they are required within a certain population density area to offer food scrap pickup as well. Haulers, of course, don't really want to do this, and for a lot of reasons, and we understand why. So they're pushing back, but I think if you live like in downtown, there isn't a downtown Thetford, but how about downtown Windsor? It may be that your hauler can pick up your food scraps. You will pay for that. But the flip side of that is that when you take all your food scraps out of your trash, you will be generating a lot less trash. So things should even out. Another option is taking your food scraps to one of your local transfer stations. The Hartford transfer station on Route 5 is already currently collecting food scraps. As far as I know, don't quote me on this, but as far as I know, there are no transfer stations in the state who are charging for food scrap drop-off at this point. They are allowed to, but they're not doing it. So that is another option for you. Feeding them to chickens is another option. If you have chickens or your neighbors have chickens. And then, of course, there is the idea of feeding them to, and this is my special guest, Sam. You can feed them to pigs, but Sam reminds me that nothing you feed to a pig should have touched any meat. So even if you're making a sandwich and you have put some slices of turkey on it and the turkey gets on the lettuce, according to the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, you should not feed that lettuce to pigs. Kind of strict, but that's the law. And if you want to learn more about this, you can go to Google, just Google Vermont swine feeding, and you'll find a lot of information about that. Is that true? Sam says that's true. And Sam may be back. Okay, Patrick, let's show some photos. I took a wander around my neighborhood in Windsor a couple of weeks ago. It happened to be in the middle of a like 20-minute blizzard, but I took some pictures of different people's composters. So for those of you who are new at this, this might give you some ideas. And Patrick's working on bringing those up. Okay, so here's a friend of mine's compost, and as you will see, it looks like a lazy man's compost, but this person actually gets great compost out of this pile, if you can believe it, and puts it on his garden. Last year, he grew some sun gold tomatoes in a pile of his compost, and they grew so high that they grew up into his quince tree. And he had was picking quince and plum sun gold tomatoes at the same time. My point in showing you this is that you don't have to be fancy. You can go to the dump, the transfer station, and get some recycled chicken wire or some kind of fencing out of the scrap metal pile. You can put scrap metal posts in the corner, and you'll see one point I want to make is that you can't see any food in this pile, and that is good, because my friend Kat says if you do it well, it doesn't smell. And Kat says you should look in a compost pile and you should never be able to see any food scraps. So every time you put food scraps in, you bury it with this carbon material, which is your dead whatever you have around except for dead animals, but dead leaves, stuff from your old perennial stocks, whatever. So this is another person's compost. And let's see if there's another one. We're going to get fancier now. Again, this is several of you have emailed about bear. Okay, so this is shredded paper. This makes a great carbon source. You throw in a bucket full of your food scraps from your kitchen, and then you cover it and surround it with a bunch of shredded paper, and this serves as a good carbon source. Next, you're going to see where this shredded paper goes. It's going to go in a what's called a hot frog. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of a hot frog, but it's a tumbler composter. But anyway, let's go with this one. We'll go back to the hot frog. This is the inside of my Soil Saver composter. This is my active pile. And I just had a 100-year-old maple tree cut down out of my yard, so I have a lot of sawdust. And you can actually see food creeping out of there, so that's not good. But this sort of gives you an idea. You should cover up your food when you're putting your food scraps in. I'm going to throw in right now. Okay, before we go to the hot frog, let me throw this in, and this is something you should write down if you don't already know. Every time you put a bucket of food scraps into your compost, you should put 3 buckets of carbon material. So your food scraps are your nitrogen. The dead brown stuff is carbon. So 3 containers of carbon for every 1 container of food scraps. And you can use shredded leaves, you can use sawdust, you can use wood chips, whatever you have around. But that is sort of a necessary part of the recipe. So here we are at the hot frog. This is a tumbler. The handle's on the side, you can't see it. But what you do is you fill up one compartment first, and then you slide that little green door over, and you leave that alone, and you start on the other side. Now this is a pretty slimy pile. I would say I would have put more shredded leaves or more paper in there, but that seems to work for the owner. So every rule has its exception, and there's a picture of it closed. So that is a hot frog. Somebody asked me a question about using tumblers. I haven't heard a lot of people who have a success with tumblers in the winter in Vermont because they tend to freeze. You all may have conflicting or better success than I, but they tend to freeze up in the winter and they're hard to turn sometimes. So I don't necessarily recommend them, although at the end I'm going to tell you a couple of other kinds of composters you can use, and I'm going to include a tumbler in that, so stay tuned. Okay. Is the picture of my 2 soil saver composters there? I want to show that to everybody because that's the kind we actually have for sale at the solid waste district, and I like them a lot. So the one on the right I've had for about 16 years, and it's still holding up very well. They're made of 100% recycled plastic, and they come in a box, and you can assemble them quite easily. I have assembled 2 or 3 of them, so I can do it. You certainly can do it. And we are going to be selling these along with our Sure closed kitchen pails, but we have not yet figured out logistically how we're going to do it and have everybody stay 6 feet apart. So I have all of your emails. If you would please stay tuned to your listservs, Front Porch Forum, and my website, and my Facebook page, Greater Upper Valley's Facebook page. We will let you know when this is going to happen, but we can't do it at least until Governor Scott see if he lists the May 15th quarantine deadline. So please stay tuned. Okay, and that's the compost that I put to bed and stopped adding to last fall, and that's taken a couple of weeks ago. So that's what it looks like in the spring. I'm going to tell you now about the other composter that I was going to mention at the end. Sorry to be bouncing around. The other composter that I'm hearing a lot about, it's quite expensive, but if you have the means, I would suggest at least Googling it and looking at it. It's called a Jora or a Yora. It's spelled Jora. It's metal on the outside, and again, like the hot frog we just looked at, it has 2 compartments. The Jora is insulated with very thick polystyrene styrofoam on the inside, so it works quite well in the winter, and it also composts quite a bit quicker in the summer, in the warmer months, than one of these does. But so there you go. Look up Jora. Somebody asked about if they needed to put their compost pile in the sun. You do not. It might help, but the heat in your compost pile does not come from the sun. It comes from all the little microbes and worms and things doing their job when you compost right. So the heat is generated from without and not from within. Kat, my guru, has her 3 bins in the woods, and she makes beautiful compost, and the sun never shines on it. Someone else asked about placement. Do they need where should you put it close to the house? You can put it as close to your house as you want it. I would definitely not put it under the eaves, so the rain or the snow won't pile on top of it. I wouldn't put it someplace where the snow plow is going to hit it. And I wouldn't put it so far away from your house that you have to walk half a mile to put your food scraps in it, particularly in the winter. So you be the judge of that. A lot of people put them near their garden if they have a garden. Both of mine are behind my garage, and I live in a neighborhood, and mine don't seem to ever smell or attract any critters, well, except for voles who come in the winter. But other than that, and I know downtown Windsor is not quite the same as rural Barnard, but we'll get into that. Oh, uh, big question everybody asks, meat scraps and bones. You should not put your meat scraps and your bones in your backyard compost. Um, your compost, no matter how good you are, will not generate enough heat to kill all the pathogens in the meat. You have to get, the temperature has to get up to like 140 degrees. So your options are continue to throw your meat scraps and bones in your trash, which the state said is fine, even after July 1st. If you're having your food scraps picked up by a commercial hauler, those food scraps are going to go to a commercial composting facility in a big giant windrow, and the heat generated in those piles far exceeds 140 degrees. So your meat scraps will lose all their pathogens. They'll be killed. Same thing goes for if you drop off your food scraps at a local transfer station. That material will be trucked somewhere to a big commercial composting facility, and the pathogens will break down. So don't put them in your backyard, but you can take them to a transfer station, put them in your curbside pickup if you have curbside pickup. Otherwise, put them in the trash. We talked about chicken and pigs already. I'm going through this very fast. Let's see, what else? I think I'm going to address some questions. Usually when I do these in person and with Kat, we talk for a little bit, and then when we open it up to questions, we get tons of questions, and one question generates another. So we'll do that, but here goes my answer to the questions that got emailed in. Avocados, eggshells, orange peels, banana peels. Some people have been told not to put those in the compost. All that I've learned is that it's fine to put them in. They don't break down as quickly, but you certainly can put them in. Sometimes you may have to run them through a second composting process when you get compost out of your first year's compost, and you're still find some orange peels or whatever, and then throw them back in the pile. Let them break down again. One important thing, very important, the PLU stickers on your fruit and produce, those nasty little things, those are plastic. They will never break down. Kat has witnessed a chicken eating one and it coming out clean and whole on the other, well, not clean, but whole on the other end. So it'll even go through a chicken without breaking down. So please do us all a favor, do the planet a favor, peel those off and throw them in your trash before you throw your food scraps out. I've worked in a number of schools, some of which kids have made these beautiful mosaics out of all the different colored food scrap, the stickers in the cafeteria. They go through the line and they peel them off. And so that's one idea. If you've got kids at home or grandkids at home right now, give them your PLU stickers and have them make a mosaic. Eggshells. You know, Kat makes fun of me because I crush my eggshells before I put them in my compost. They still don't break down. It takes years and years and years. Somebody asked if there's a better use for them. I don't know. They're all over my garden. I suspect that maybe they deter cutworms, but I don't know. So they're perfectly good for your compost. They just are really stubborn about breaking down. So go ahead and throw them in, but you'll see them for years probably. This is another question that comes up a lot, and I got 2 questions today about it. After 1 year, my pile is just dead leaves and food scraps. I would suspect that, number one, it's always better to break down and shred your leaves when you put them in your pile. I find that if you put them in whole, they like pancake, and they actually create these little anaerobic stink pads. So that could be one reason if you're putting dry leaves in and they're not breaking down. The other thing is that you may be putting in too much carbon so that your pile is too dry. So I would suggest maybe experimenting and putting in, chop whatever carbon material you put in, and try mixing up the food scraps, or making sure the food scraps are in the center of the pile. Amy Howlett, you asked me that question, and you can always call me at the office or email me, and we can go into that further. But I suspect that's what your problem is. Bears. My friend Sam has a bear who lives out on my porch, and I was going to bring him in. He's 60 years old. I was going to bring him in and have him talk to you about bears, but he's shedding, and so he's not coming in my house. But anyway, somebody emailed me today, and I know this is representative of a lot of people. There are people live in the woods where there are bears. Forrest Hammond, the Vermont forester, many of you know him, met with all of us recycling coordinators once about a year and a half ago, and he said, I hope this statewide composting plan fails miserably, because it's not a good thing to be bringing bears closer to people's houses and having humans and bears in contact. I get where he's coming from, but this law is happening. So again, I'm going to go back to Kat's theory about it. If you do it well, it doesn't smell. When your compost smells, when any kind of an animal, wild animal, can smell your compost, smell your food scraps, they're going to be attracted and they're going to come check it out. You probably know that a black bear can smell sunflower seed from 1 mile away. If you have bird feed in your house, in your yard, at the time of when bears are roaming around, please bring them inside. I don't have any cure for this. I know people who have put their compost, surrounded their compost with electric fence. I know people who have put a little peanut butter on the electric fence, and the bear puts its nose on that, and that's pretty much discourages the bear. It zaps them. It doesn't do them any harm, I don't think, for that split second. But I would say, if you have bears, try using the theory where you put your food scraps in the middle of your pile. Make a nest. That's another thing Kat does, is she builds a nest out of the carbon material, hay or straw or whatever. And so when she puts food scraps in, she puts it down in the nest, and then she covers it up. And she pulls it apart, she puts more food scraps in, she covers it again. But anyway, give that a try. I don't have any easy answers. I know it's a large problem. So that's the best I can do on bears.
Hey, Ham?
Yep.
This is Patrick. I just wanted to alert you to the fact that there's a lot of great questions coming in the chat. I don't know if you can actually see the chat, or do you want to save
12 questions? Okay. Okay.
And they are all different.
Okay. I'm going to address those in just a minute. I'm almost through with my questions. Tumblers in Vermont, somebody asked about. I've already covered that. They freeze. They're not really great. Compostable ware. A lot of people are seeing compostable forks, knives, dishes, bowls. It's greenwashing. I'm telling you, it's greenwashing. You'll see oftentimes on the package, it will say in very little letters, compostable only in an industrial facility. a backyard compost will not break down any compostable cups, glasses, plates, anything. And even in a commercial facility, it takes a long time. I know of a restaurant in Ludlow that let their dishwasher go and got rid of all of their dishes and stunk a lot of money into purchasing everything compostable. And the hauler who picks up their food scraps doesn't want any of this because it won't break down. So what you've got is now you've got bona fide plastic cups and Cumberland Farms, sorry Cumberland Farms, plastic cups going in the trash, and then you have a cup that looks like it's plastic, but it's supposedly compost. If you throw a compostable cup in your recycling, you've contaminated the entire recycling load because a compostable cup is not recyclable as plastic. It's also not compostable in your compost pile. So I'm not going to get on my high horse about this anymore, but I would urge you not to buy compostable tableware of any kind. A lot of food, well, not a lot, but several solid waste districts, mine included, we are experimenting with getting a bunch of reusable rentable or loanable plates, saucers, cups, silverware. Of course, that's a really bad idea right now, given what's going on with the virus. But at some point, these are, I hope, going to become very popular. If you want to see an interesting place who's doing this, it's the Central Vermont Solid Waste Management District. If you look on their website, they've got a wonderful thing about tableware. And, as I say, although we can't do it at the moment, they've got a wonderful system. And so I highly encourage you to try using that, or bring your own stuff when you go somewhere. Bring your own coffee mug or whatever. Somebody asked a question about when is manure compost done? I am not a gardener. I'm not a master gardener, and I hesitate to answer that question. And they also asked when they should apply it. I would say if they bought organic cow manure with other compost in it, and there's little pieces of manure in it, I would say that's fine. You don't want to put fresh manure on your compost. On your garden. It's okay to put some manure in your compost pile. A lot of people do that. Horse manure is particularly good for that because it has shavings and straw mixed in with it, and that helps aerate your pile. So I'm going to sort of let that one go. If that person who asked me that wants to email again, I'll see if I can find some information, but I would suggest you go on like the Ag Department or the Vermont Extension Service website. All right. I'm going to the questions now. Curtis Atkinson says, just chimed in, he says, let your compost sit for at least a year. Compost manure at least a year before putting it on your garden. Okay, I'm starting from the top with your questions. Barbara Ball, composting my seed or cat litter is a bad idea. There are different schools of thought on this. You certainly do not want to put your cat litter, compost with cat litter on your vegetable garden. I know a lot of people who make a separate pile for their kitty litter, and they add some horse or cow manure to it, or some grass clippings, whatever. But if somebody wants to address that in the chat, I'm happy to pass that on. But I would say um, I would say if you're gonna making compost just to throw on your lawn or around some trees, probably fine. You don't want to put cat or dog litter uh, poops in your compost. I hope that answers that question. Is it okay to keep a composter in the garage? Um, I expect it is. You might get mice in your garage. Um, Also, as long as I don't know if your garage has a cement floor or not. Um, if it does, then just be sure to put enough, you probably want to put some dirt and some uh, food scraps, enough food scraps and other carbon material. It might smell. I would say give it a try. That's a new one for me, but go for it. If you live in the woods and you've got bears, that might be an option.
Hey, Cam, sorry,
Yes.
I'm just going to interrupt you. So you started with Barbara Ball's question, but
Yeah.
there's
Are there
one
more?
of hers pertaining to if voles are actually a problem or other critters to have in your pile. See that one?
Oh, okay. Um, I, you know, I have voles. I don't have any mice because I have so many cats in my neighborhood. Not a cat person, but sorry, my neighbor's not on here to witness this. But I would say rodents, cats, and squirrels and chipmunks. It's not bad to have them in your compost pile. I think it's going to be hard to keep them out. My little vole comes in the winter and eats a lot of stuff in the winter and then goes away. So I think it's darn near impossible to keep them out. I will say one example of a composter, if you want to build your own, is to use 1/4-inch hardware cloth, which looks like screen, but it's it's heavy duty. And some people will run that underneath. So by the way, a soil saver composter has no bottom. So if you want to try to keep voles out, you set your soil saver up if you buy one, cut a piece of hardware cloth, put it down, lay the composter on top of it. If you want to make your own composter out of 2x4s or scrap lumber or metal poles, whatever, you can indeed put hardware cloth on the bottom, and that might deter some rodents. But I think I wouldn't worry about them because they're just helping you get rid of your food. Okay. Critters in your pile. No, that was an okay. Add liquid into compost. Is it good or bad? It's okay to put. Some people pour like milk into their compost. What you want to avoid is wet and stinky compost. So if you're putting enough carbon material in to offset the liquid, you're probably okay. I've heard of people whose compost piles are too dry and they actually spray a hose on them if it's a covered pile. So again, check that out. I'm going to mention one thing right now. There's a wonderful, where did my notes go? There's a wonderful pamphlet brochure put out by, again, Central Vermont Solid Waste District. It's called Here's the Dirt. If you Google Here's the Dirt compost, it is a fantastic piece of literature that they've put together and very plain with lots of pictures and descriptions. So you might want to refer to that in terms of liquid. Okay. Crushing eggshells and putting them in the hole before transplanting your tomato plant. Great idea. Never heard of it. I'm just going to pass that on to people. Why can't I get this? Are there printed materials that should not be used because of toxins in the ink or from paper making process? Most all paper now is made with soy ink. So I think that's probably okay. I might not want to put an entire LL Bean catalog in there, not to pick on LL Bean. I think newspaper and office paper is better, but I haven't heard anything that magazines are particularly bad. I personally would avoid them. So, um, Patrick, this is not.
Nancy, just above that one, had a question about specifically about chicken manure and goat manure. Do you see that one?
I don't. I'm having trouble scrolling down on my chat thing here.
I don't know if I can help you from afar
You
there. But
probably
what I can do is I can read the questions to you.
Well, I'm on. That was Marcia Stern.
Yeah.
The next one is from Patrick Cody to everybody.
Well, so did you get the one from Nancy about chicken manure and goat?
No. Why don't you read it?
It's just chicken manure, goat manure.
Yes, they're both fine. Again, I don't think I would put them in fresh, but I think they're both very helpful to a compost pile. You can also put them straight on your garden once they've aged. I'm just going to read the ones I can see. Do you need to aerate the compost pile or turn it over? Great question. Some people do, some people don't. I don't turn mine. Cat Buxton says if you put enough carbon material in so that there's air flowing, you don't need to. Particularly the stalks of like daylilies and perennials that have, they're hollow in the middle. That's a great way to keep, if you put enough of that in, you break them up a little bit, put them in and mix them in and just, put a layer of those down on top of food scraps and they should keep your pile aerated. Also, one other thing I learned from Kat is that if you're starting a new compost pile, lay some corn stalks or some sunflower stalks on the bottom, sort of in a crisscross pattern. That will allow air to come up through your compost. Your compost pile needs air, and your microbes need air, and your worms need air. So do that. Start with a crisscross stalks of some sort, then put some hay or some shredded leaves on top of that. Then start your food scrap pile, your compost pile. Kind of zipping through these. Can I compost sod and grass roots? I'm not sure I'd put grass roots in my compost, but if you break up your sod and put a little bit in at a time, I mean, certainly people put in dirt, and that is fine. Again, that might be a good pile to start separately outside of your compost pile. But I'd just experiment with this stuff and see what works, and then keep a log and tell your friends about it. Dairy products. I did mention milk. I'd put milk in. I put little bits of cheese in. I wouldn't put a whole wheel of it in, but I think small amounts of leftover butter on a piece of bread or whatever is fine. Wood ash. Wood ash is dead. It won't do anything to your compost pile. It has a lot of good minerals in it. I just was Googling today to see what plants are like wood ash. Apparently asparagus does, and rhubarb, but I wouldn't put it in your compost. I'd Google what vegetables and plants like it, and then I would spread it directly on those plants. Don't bury them. Do you need to have 2 compost piles and let one sit? A lot of people do that. I do that. I start one in the spring and I use it all summer and I use it up until the ground freezes, and then I top it off and leave it, and I don't keep adding to it. I leave it and then I start another pile next to it. In the winter, that goes through the winter, and I actually use that all the way through till the next fall. So basically I stop a pile in November, I start one in December, and I use it all the way through the next November. I sort of contradicted myself, but that's the way I do it. Let's see. Still don't know why this is. How many people will your composters support? Good question. I'm a family of one, and my composters never get full. I would say if you're going to like a family of four, I would say you would definitely want two composters. And you can go, if you Google soil saver, you can see the dimensions. They're like 20, I don't know, 28 by 28 by 3 feet high, something like that. They're not huge. If you've got a family of four, it would fill up quite fast. I might consider, if you're ingenious, I might consider building your own. A 3-bin compost system is great because you can start one, and then you can, once you stop in November, you can start the other one, and then you can start a third one. Again, look at pictures online. There are tons of pictures of all different kinds of compost systems. And if you're clever and your partner, your husband, your kid, whatever, is looking for a project, set them to it and have them build one. Okay. Don't know if I've gotten every other question. Patrick, are you seeing any? I'm sorry, I'm just not able to slide my.
To me, it appears that you have covered all of the questions. There was one in there specifically about grass cuttings, and I know you talked about
grass cuttings. If grass cuttings are fresh and green, they're considered nitrogen. They're considered the same as food scraps. If you let them dry out and get brown, then they're considered carbon. You throw them in with shredded leaves. Also, you might consider mowing your lawn and leaving your grass clippings on your lawn. Very good for your lawn. And you don't have to, certainly don't have to put fertilizer or herbicides, pesticides. I hope you're not going to do that on your lawn. But I highly suggest leaving grass clippings on your lawn. I know I've just given you tons of information. I hope that you were able to scratch some of it down. Again, please feel free to email me questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll point you in the right direction. If you Google composting.com, if you go on the Vermont Agency of Natural Resource website, or just Google composting in Vermont, you will find all sorts of Vermont specific information. Or again, just Google, how do I build a composter? You'll be reading this stuff for days. There's a lot of it out there, and don't be intimidated. Just jump in and start. And I mean, it's just compost. If it doesn't do very well, it doesn't do very well. Ask a couple of questions and try something new. But the big things to remember, again, is 3 to 1. Cover your food scraps so the critters can't see them, can't smell them. And one other thing that just occurred to me, if some people have an open compost pile, just with, they throw it at the back of their yard or in the woods, really bad for dogs. I know I've heard of a dog eating compost out of the pile and the dog died. So not a good idea. If you have the compost pile, please try to fence it in. And also certain food scraps like bananas and bread will often get moldy. You want to be careful not to stick your head in your compost pile and breathe that stuff it's not good for you. It's the same, but it's the same kind of mold that will off an animal. Sorry to put it that way, but just that's another thing to look out for. So I'm going to stop. Thank you all so much for attending. As I said, I expected 5 to 10 people. and I think the final total was 105. I'm sure some of those people didn't show up, but here you are. And I would love to know, I'd love to have feedback. This is the first time I've ever done this, and I'd like to do more, particularly if this self-quarantining, socially distancing thing is going to continue for a while. I'd like to do one on batteries, much shorter than this. I'd like to do one on materials that can't be thrown in the trash in Vermont, but can be recycled, like electronics, batteries, bulbs, etc. So I'm going to put one of those together. Hope you can join me when I do that. And please use the Greater Upper Valley Solid Waste District or Southern Windsor, Windham County Solid Waste District as a resource. Mary O'Brien is my colleague at Southern Windsor, and we're both happy to answer questions, anything we can do to help you. So stay well, stay healthy, don't go nuts, go outside. And oh, by the way, I took a walk last night in Windsor and I saw a mother black bear and 2 cubs in a field, and I've never seen a cub go up a tree so fast. So if you get chased by a bear, don't run up a tree. Most of you know that. These cubs went up a 60-foot tree in about 7 seconds. It was amazing. So watch out for bears, have fun, and have a good evening.
Thanks, Ham.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was super cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Feedback, give me feedback, send feedback. Email me feedback, good or bad.